Want to know how to create a heavy chipped effect on your miniatures? Well, check this video out. Hi there, Chris here with another quick tip for you all. In this video, we are going to take a look at creating heavy chipping on a model surface. Now, this is not quite like the regular chipping where you have these slight deviations in the armor surface, but like big, heavy, chunky pieces have been ripped out. To get us started, we're going to use some Rhinox hide. We're going to use some sponge that can be found commonly in packs of blisters of miniatures, or even if you head down to your big box store in the finishing brushes section of the painting area, you'll find these kinds of sponges. You'll find these sponges pretty much everywhere. Tweezers, just to hold on to the sponge. I grab a quick little chunk, and the really kind of rough, odd end of the piece of foam that I tore off is what we will use to apply paint. So we put a little bit of the Rhinox hide onto our palette, grab a little bit of the paint into the sponge, and in a straight back and forth kind of motion, we apply the paint to the surface. And the sponge is a really great way of doing this particular effect, as it creates random little dots and splooges and things of that nature all over the surface. And so it's really fun way to create this look of chipped armor. Now you can stop here at this color and it will convey the sense of chipped armor, especially if you went probably with a slightly darker red rather than going all the way to a brown. I went with the Rhinox hide because it has a lot of red quality to it, but it is quite dark. Next, we're going to use some Evil Sun Scarlet. Now we're going to slap a little bit of this onto the palette. We're going to switch to a detail brush or standard brush, whatever comes to a nice fine point. Thin it out with just a little bit of water, just the dampness of the brush. And we are going to begin applying this color right on the bottom portions of each of the little dark areas. Now, you also have to bear in mind how the light sourcing is coming down. So the imagined light sourcing is coming straight down at the shield. So help holding the model so that you can kind of visualize how that is going to play out, is probably the best way to go. Otherwise, because depending on how the shield is angled, it will change the way you place your highlights in these little abstract dark shapes that we have on the shield that we did with the previous step with the sponge. And again, the rule of thumb being you just basically apply this little line of color on the bottom portion of each of those little abstract shapes that were created from the sponge. Now, sometimes you do end up running into areas and you kind of end up annihilating some of that nice little random shapes that were created, but to really kind of fully realize the effect, you kind of have to. And it is a bit of a pain, and can be a little bit discouraging. Can also create a bit of back and forth as far as how you're painting and all these things. It can take a bit of time, but when you're into this finer step of finishing off a miniature, you're gonna take more time anyway, so it's not really that big a deal. So you can see here we're concentrating mostly on the red sections, and we will address the blue in a moment. Wild Rider Red is next. We slap a little bit onto the palette, and we go to our even finer detail brush. This is more equivalent to a 0 or even a 00 brush for anybody out there. GW's Artificer brush is about the equivalent of this sharpness of the bristles. You can see here, again, I'm just continuing, just laying small little dots and dashes on the areas where we had previously applied our Evil Sun Scarlet. This is to help create that illusion of depth on here. Now, again, with the Rhinox hide, it might seem a little too contrasty, but in person, it actually doesn't breed that striking of a difference of color. But otherwise, it is a really fun, easy way to create a really interesting heavy chipping. And also, you could come in with some silvers and apply it on top of the Rhinox hide, leaving just a little bit of the Rhinox hide behind, kind of like an outline. And that also would have given us a really great effect. And you could also follow it up by applying a little bit of these highlight colors to create even more depth on the surface. Now, the reason why we apply the highlights is because, well, we're imitating what light is doing on these surfaces, and the light would hit these edges of the chipped paint. If you've ever looked at heavy industrial equipment or anything like that, they'll have big chunks of their paint job taken right out, and you know, it is what it is, and it's all part, and that's really the inspiration for a lot of these miniatures and these, you know, battle tanks and things of that nature, where we're creating these effects on these surfaces. And heavy diesel equipment and stuff like that is often the reference for those kind of things, especially with battle tanks and everything like that. Next, we're going to jump over to some Incubi Darkness. We're going to slap a little bit of this onto the palette, grab a number 2 brush or number 1 brush, and begin stippling the color onto the surface. Now, we could also took some of the blue, added a little bit of black, but I kind of felt like just hitting something a little bit different here, going with a darker color. And with the addition of the green in there, it also gives us an interesting kind of look as we begin building the colors up on the surface. Now, mainly, I just wanted to demonstrate with this brush and this technique that you can also create these abstract little shapes and little random little things on the surfaces with your brush, as long as you keep the paint somewhat thin and keep your hand fairly light and just kind of let the bristles dance around the surface. You'll get that random kind of pattern. Caldor Sky is next. We're going to slap this onto the palette. We're going to take a little bit of the Incubi Darkness, mix it in, because the Caldor Sky was just a little too intense, and I just want to, you know, kind of bring the color down a bit, and also help with this color, help transition it into the Incubi Darkness by adding this little bit of this green into the value. It also helps separate the shield from the main figure, as, you know, just helping create a bit of separation, as you know, you don't want to feel like you know, the Marine got his armor and then he got the shield that same day. It just, you know, I don't know, it just sounds kind of weird. And so, you know, again, as we work our way around the surface, I'm only applying this highlight color to the bottom portion of the previous abstract shapes I had made, and I can also create little dashes and little spots of color here and there. And we can also create the illusion of the scratches and other things onto the armor as well. And again, going for more shallow type of chipping is a different effect, as opposed to going for very heavy chipping. Techless Blue is next, and this is going to be applied with our finest detail brush. And with this color, again, we are going to begin applying it onto the bottom portion of the darker color of the shapes. And this is also the time in which I will also apply little dots and dashes and like little simulated scrapes and cuts in the surface. I didn't do it for the red one, I just did it for the blue here, just because, again, we have a greater amount of contrast here and such, and you know, it felt kind of, you know, appropriate, as well as we're demonstrating, you know, different ways of applying paint onto a model surface, achieving very similar results. Here you can see I'm just simply creating like a scratch on the surface here, and as long as you keep your brush light, keep your paint a little bit thin, just so it's nice and workable, you can pretty much do whatever you want. And you know, it doesn't have to be an overly complicated process. It doesn't have to be always done with sponges and, you know, particular oil products or anything like that. You can do this just simply by playing or painting with your paints and brushes and apply it to the surface. And, you know, again, it doesn't have to be really overly complicated. It can be really, really straightforward. So here you can see with the blue area, like I've just kind of really gone ham and just really making that blue area of the shield just kind of really scratched up, messed up. Again, it also creates a bit of visual contrast from the armor itself. Fire Dragon Bright is next, and yeah, I want to build a little bit more contrast in some of these areas. I also want to catch some of the edges, really bring forward some of these highlights and everything like that, so that's why we're switching back over to some more brighter orange. With the Fire Dragon Bright, you can see here again, we're just going for corners here and there. It is a very, very deliberate application of color. It is it's why you really do need your sharpest, most pointiest of brushes, because you know, trying to do this with like you know, your big base coating brush, it would just be a huge pain. It can be done, but it'd be a huge pain. And you know, this is painting miniatures is supposed to be relaxing and enjoyable. So if you're getting stressed out from a lot of this stuff, then maybe, you know, maybe you want to find a new hobby, because, you know, this is not supposed to be stressful. This is not supposed to be, you know, painful in any way. This is supposed to be fun. We're supposed to be having fun when we're painting our miniatures. And If you're not having fun, well then, yeah, again, you might have to look elsewhere because, you know, it's kind of crazy. So you can see here again with the red, we've separated it from the main miniature itself. It doesn't feel like the same red, even though it is red. We're going to use blue horror. And this is going to be obviously be for the blue areas, and this is going to be just the final little spot highlights here and there on scratches and, you know, little chips and dings and things of that nature. And again, it's just a very deliberate application of color into some key spots, going for corners, going for where you imagine light would catch on some of these scratches and these big chips. Again and again and again. The highlights are placed at the bottom of the darkest color. So if you started off with a really dark color, your next color will be on the bottom portion to create that highlight, the illusion of the highlight. You could also create additional depth by going with your darkest color and staying close to your base value and just coming down just a bit, and it creates that shadow. And in fact, you can also create by adding, you know, black or dark brown or anything like that, creating more of a shadow, and you can actually accentuate that shadow value before coming into the highlighting process. So again, you know, there's many ways to go about it. It all depends on what kind of effect you're looking to create. Heavy chipping can make the model look a bit messy, but upon closer inspection, you'll see that it was very, very deliberate. You can see all the highlights and all the transitions and the effect. And as well, the weathering also helps tell the story of the model. Now, the shield here on the Space Marine is heavily weathered and beaten up. Why? Because it's a shield and it's protecting the Space Marine. The Space Marine doesn't have as much chipping on his armor because he's got a big shield that's taking all the damage. Big thank you to my patrons for their continued support and all you brand new ones, as well as all of you here on the YouTubes clicking that membership button. Huge thank yous to you all. And for everybody else out there, feel free to hit that like and subscribe, and feel free to leave comments down below as far as what you would like to see covered in this series.